All right, I think we're safe to say that we're live. So, hi everyone, happy Thursday, and welcome to our NoCodeOps live community show. Today is the first episode of our new series of events, which is very exciting as we will be building in public for the first time, and it's a new thing for our community here. And so, I'm sure you're all gonna get a lot of value from this event in particular. Is going to be set out in along the whole month of May. And so make sure you sign up to all the events so that you don't miss out on this opportunity. As leaders in the field of no-code operations, we wanted to make sure that you do, in fact, acquire all the necessary skills to build your company's CRM using best practice and using two of the most loved tools in our community, which are Zapier and Airtable. And so with that thought in mind, we have today joining us Gareth, our no-code consultants and experts. So hi, Gareth. And we also have Phil, who will be joining us soon. And so Gareth, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Claudia. This is really exciting. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. When did you first started into the no-code space? And, hello to the audience. I can see there's, already people in the chat. So hi, Rachel, and everyone watching us today.
Yes, hello. And to your question, I fell into it by accident about 5 years ago. It was 2018, I believe, that I was laid off from my finance job where I was living and breathing in Excel documents. And I'm sure many people have the same frustration where, when you work in Excel and somebody saves a new version of the file and it's a mess and nothing's live, it's all local to the computer. And long story short, I lived and breathed in Excel. And when I was let go from my position, I read an article about no code, and I thought that sounds cool. And just naturally was curious about it. One thing led to another, and started a YouTube channel. And I don't even remember how I got here, to be honest.
Well, you're here because you're an expert in the field, and we all look up to you and all your solutions. So the whole role of no-code operations is kind of new in the space. What's your own take on this new particular role? And I can see Phil has joined us, so I'm gonna put him in as you give me your answer.
Sure. So no code is really changing the way that we work, both for large organizations as well as small medium businesses. Just giving all of us now the power to really cultivate a unique app experience that we can stand up in a matter of hours compared to months. Not to mention a dramatic decrease in costs if you were to hire help to implement these things. What you can get created now not only happens in a shorter amount of time, but also a tenth the cost to build your own unique workflows and apps. So it's just allowing for increased productivity in ways that I couldn't even fathom 10 years ago, frankly.
100%. And that's, one of, our main purposes here, at least in our community at NoCodeOps. We really want to spread the good words and make sure that all our operators get empowered. And so, yeah, today is a fantastic day to do that. So may the force be with you all, operators, because you're going to get some really good skills and some good knowledge from our series. So Phil, welcome. Welcome into
Good to be here.
show.
Of course, my internet went out this second.
Yeah, I think he's broadcasting from Florida. He's attending a conference there, so your internet is a little bit choppy, but we'll have to do with that.
We'll make it work. You hear me okay now?
Yeah, all good.
Cool. Great.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit of what we're doing today? Why are we here? Why are we building in public for the first time?
Yeah, so not only do we have a community of all of these folks using Airtable and Zapier and all these amazing tools, but we use them ourselves internally also as ops professionals for NoCodeOps as a business. And if you haven't seen recently, NoCodeOps.com is now our new overall brand for everything we do. We unified our conference, our community, our newsletter, our product offering, literally all into one unified brand, NoCodeOps. And when we were doing that, we had to rework how all of our backend systems work, because these were all coming, all of our lead information, everything was coming from separate places. How we managed folks was all coming from separate places. And now they're all coming from one place, but multiple ways to interact with us. And so we said, we don't really build Operator, which is our no-code visibility platform, in public, but it's a really cool opportunity to build our actual systems in public. So instead of just building them on our own, I had all these questions because, I consider myself a novice. I'm not, the foremost expert. So I wanted to bring someone in and build this in front of folks live. And so, because I'm sure if I have questions, other people have similar questions. And that's when I called up Gareth. So Gareth, welcome, man.
Hey, thanks. This is going to be a good time. So how do you want to kick things off, Phil? Do you want to, obviously I know we want to get into some building, but I think just discussing in general what we're trying to accomplish before we go to build anything is one of those critical components that I've noticed a lot of people want to kind of glaze over. And from experience, what I've learned is if you try to just start building, you might go down a rabbit hole that you don't want to, or that doesn't lead anywhere productive because you didn't put a bit of a plan in place first. So maybe we can start with a bit of an overview.
Let's start there. Cool. I'm sharing my screen, and Claudia, if you can bring up my screen share.
There it is.
What
a cool branding. Is that a new website?
Oh yeah, look it up. That's our new website. So what shiny. So the goal here is this, right? Is that we at NoCodeOps have multiple ways that folks interact with us and kind of enter our ecosystem. That could be because they want to learn more about Operator, which is the tool that we're building, which is the no-code visibility platform for Airtable and Zapier, of course, right? They want to apply to our community where they can talk to other like-minded professionals, attend events like this, or our conference, which is happening in spring 2024. Like they want to come and attend that either as a speaker or a sponsor, or just come jam with us in person. So sharing my screen here, right? As you can see, there's multiple.
I think I'm gonna have to fill in the gaps there. There's multiple forms.
When
there you go. Let's wait for his stable connection.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah, I was just saying we have multiple forms on the website, on the landing page.
Yep. So multiple forms, right? And with these forms, they are all being zapped into different Airtable tables. Now, some of these forms have the same information, some have different information, but our thinking is the first big question we have, right, is how do we get one record for a customer that is linked to multiple form entries? Because we kind of want to divorce the idea of a form entry and an actual, contact and account and opportunity and all of that other stuff, because they're different. And so Gareth, kind of before I go kind of hands-on and show off some of that stuff, right? Any thoughts on why it's important to like separate those things out so that like when somebody enters a piece of form information, that form record is not the lead status, the opportunity, the contact, the account all in one, like why it's important to separate that and link records?
Yes. So thank you for asking this question because I think this is something that we kind of glaze over. And if you're building your first CRM, maybe you wouldn't consider this. I think it's important to break this out, especially in your case, Phil, where you have multiple different entry points to your inbound inquiries, because you want to know the history of somebody having interacted with your different content, your different opportunities, etc. It's entirely feasible that somebody would fill out a form interested in your conference, as you're sharing on your screen right here, and then back on the homepage, they could have also filled out their email and said, hey, I also want to join this wait list, right? Or, I guess what I'm getting at here is there are numerous ways that people may interact with your business over time, and you want all of those interactions essentially tied back to that contact information. And so by breaking these things out into two separate places and tracking that history, you're going to get better insights into how someone interacts with your company over time.
Amazing. So on that note, I have created just like a totally clean, separate Airtable environment here. And what I've done is, now you first tell me if this is even good practice, right? I've separated out two bases here. One that would, in theory, be collecting all of the data from forms, right? This is divorced from our process right now. I didn't want to do anything super live, right? So this is kind of like our demo base that we're going to be using for the next 4 weeks. So here's, information that can come in via any of these forms. Instead of our Webflow forms, I'm just using Airtable forms, right? So, there's data that can come into any of these forms, so operator, community, conference, right? And then I've created a totally separate CRM base that's just based on a standard kind of Airtable template. And so my first question for you, right, is how do we use email as a unique identifier to link something coming from here, right? So let's say, as an example, I'm going to go into my forms, right? I'm going to just add some data here, right? Let's call it Philip at test.com. Use tool 1 and tool 3. Company name is test. Track is, say, operator. Company URL is, test.com. So this is one form I filled out. If I also have, so I guess before that, right, I might not have any record in a deal in any kind of CRM yet, because I've just filled out a form for the first time. So what would be your recommendation here around, like, how would that process even start around creating something in the CRM because they came in through a form?
Okay, tons to unpack here. So let me kind of pause and rewind.
Step number one.
Let's first talk about data sets.
Yes.
We've got, when we build a table in Airtable, every single table is its own set of data. You can get as granular as you want to with that. And in your example here, you've built separate tables for each form, which is perfectly fine, but not required. You could make it so that all of your forms are recorded on one table and segmented by a single select field that would say, they filled out form 1, and these were the answers they gave us. Here they filled out form 2 and they answered different questions, and so we have different information in different fields. That would be viable.
Saying that, like,
I think we got a
field, right, called like
can we rewind there, Phil? I think I lost your connection for a second.
Oh, sorry about that. So you're saying that all of these, instead of being different tables, could all be one table, and there would maybe be a field called form, right? And I can say, like, conf is a form.
Exactly. You could put like a single select field there that would allow you to then create different views inside of the table with each, for each form. So as somebody fills out the conference form, it would be added to this particular table, the responses they gave, and linked to their contact record, which we'll get to. That's the second part of your question. And you could have a variety of views. One view that filters in, I just want to look at all my conference form that have been filled out. And so you could apply a filter to the view that only brings in those particular forms. But now you have everything in one table, which allows you to draw more insights. You can look at total numbers of forms filled out. You can graphically represent what percentage of forms received in the month of May were conference forms versus operator forms.
That's interesting. And we have so many people in the chat from all over the world. It's so amazing to see. And Rachel is saying, personal fan of this approach, same table, and then segment by different views if you want to see the entry source. Yeah, 100%. I use that as well.
Love it.
Got it.
Yeah.
So then, Gareth, what you're saying is there would be different columns here, right, that the Zap from Webflow would be filling out. So not every column may get filled out in every single new record, but a person may exist on multiple lines here.
Exactly. Well, I would slightly rephrase what you said. I wouldn't say that a person exists on multiple lines. I would say every line represents a form having been filled out. And those forms would connect to, and here's where I'm going to take you to what I would suggest a new table here of contacts.
Yep.
So in this new table that I would link a table to our forms and add a table of contacts. And at a minimum, the contact information has to be, email and probably name, but maybe you don't always collect names. It looked like maybe you had a form that was just email.
Yep. So let me do this here. So I'll make email kind of our UID, right?
You can, absolutely.
Cool. And we'll call this table contacts.
While you're doing that, I also want to point out that while there might be best practices, your process is unique to you. So everyone's going to have their own unique needs. Generally, I would not recommend making an email address the primary field. I would want to see something that actually tells me who that record is. So I would use a full name field, but it's not wrong to do. There's not a right or wrong.
So that's a good point. So one thing I've been scared about in the past is making the main record something that is not the unique identifier, but is that okay?
It's okay. So this is going to bring up another question of case sensitivity. So if somebody fills out, and it's funny that when you filled out your forms on the previous table, one of them you put the email with a capital P and one of them you did not. If we're using email as a unique identifier, case sensitivity will matter. And so we'll have to apply in our automation a lowercase function that automatically, puts whatever characters we received in that email field and uses only the lowercase values to make sure that we don't duplicate data.
Yep. So your recommendation now for this main primary field, are you saying it doesn't matter if it's the unique identifier or not?
How do I answer this question? I think the proper this is my approach, and
how would you do it?
Everyone has their own ways, right? My preference is to say I want that leftmost field. This is the primary field. I want it to follow a few rules. I want it to be as unique as possible, and I want it to help identify what lives in that table. This is a table of contact information. If you show me an email address, that doesn't necessarily help my brain know who the contact is, because I personally think of people by name. So I would do something like first and last name, or as you're putting here, name and company, or, what I really like to do, and for anybody who's watched our YouTube channel, they'll have probably seen me do this dozens of times. I like to use a concatenate formula in that primary field. And this helps me with my two goals, making it unique and helping identify. Because I can do something like take the first name and then combine the first name, string it together with the email address or the company name or something like that to help me really get a unique identifier there.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing here. I'm saying first name as like a single text field, last name as a single text field, and then company as another single text. And now what I can do here under contacts is make this a, let's take a look here, edit field, go to formula, and say, first name. And how do it's a concat, right? So I have to put concatenate first.
You can write a concatenate formula at the beginning there, and then you'll open up your parenthesis. And then after first name, you'll probably want a space. Nope. You were good with the parenthesis. Yeah. Comma, quotation, space inside of that. That'll put a static space in. Let's do another comma, bring in last name field, comma, quotation again, space at space. Yeah, you get it. You know it. And then refer to that company name, and we're golden.
You probably need to rename, the field.
There was
Close
a problem.
parenthesis.
What's this?
Close. Yeah, I got to close that parenthesis on that formula, and then you're good.
So now if I put Phil Lakin NCO, boom, it should fill that out. Look at that.
There you go. That's nice.
So now you've got a proper
for email. Look at that.
Phil is literally building.
So Gareth, let me ask you this. So now let's say Philip at test, right, filled out these two things, these two forms, okay?
Yep. How
would I then link the contact to that? And let's say that contact didn't even exist yet.
Right. Yeah, this is the power and magic of automation. So first we need to have a linked relationship between these two tables, right? We've got forms, we've got contacts. We need to have them connected. So we have to build a new field, either on the form or on the contacts, that links us to the other table.
Okay. Is that a link to another record?
Mm-hmm.
Here? Okay.
Yep. Link to another record, link directly to the forms. And we're going to, this is important. Every time you build a linked relationship, you need to ask yourself, is this a one-to-many or a many-to-many or a one-to-one relationship? Which that's all database jargon. So let me make it, put it in plain English. Can a contact submit multiple forms? Yes. So therefore, we want it to link to multiple forms. Can a form be filled out by multiple contacts at the same time? No. One form is being filled out by one person. And so we can create this field, allow the contacts to link to multiple forms. But on the form side of things, we want to toggle that off and say, this form, every instance of the form can only link to one contact at a time. You can skip the lookup fields for now.
So when I go to forms, and now, is there a linked record thing here automatically or no?
Yep,
there it is.
Right there. Mm-hmm. Double click on that one and toggle off with multiple. There we go.
Very cool.
And that's a great point you just highlighted. In Airtable, when we build a linked relationship, it's reciprocal. So if A links to B, B has to link to A. As soon as we create that link, we see it exist in both places.
Mm-hmm.
Cool stuff.
Gareth, you got some fun in the chat. You got Jen, who says, really appreciate your demo, Gareth. First learned to concatenate and build my own basic CRM for contacts, interaction, and opportunities from one of your awesome Gap Consulting news videos. And then we have Marcus, just tuned in, but I recognize that hat. What's up, Gareth?
Gareth is very famous in this no-code world.
Awesome.
So I've got to jump in just a moment, right? Because fun fact, here in Florida, I'm speaking at a conference downstairs in a few minutes here at No Code Days, which is really fun. So Gareth is going to be here to just keep going over some kind of best practice here and answer questions from the audience. And we will be continuing the series and going much more in depth because, as Gareth saw earlier, I have a list of about 50 questions that I want to be asking here. But Gareth, from the last step here, right? How would I link these two up now?
Perfect. So this is going to come in the automation portion of things. So we will build, and we won't today, I don't think we'll have the time, but an automation for you in particular. Your forms are in Webflow. That's where your website is set up. When people fill out a form, it's Webflow. Is that right?
Yep. Okay. It's in Webflow, and then it's getting zapped into Airtable.
Brilliant. So in the automation, here's in plain speak what we'll build. When a form is filled out, take that will trigger the automation, right? I'm sure most of us know that when we build an automation, It consists of a trigger and one or more action steps. The trigger is what awakens the automation. So we say, form was submitted, automation turns on and says, it's time to go to work. What am I going to do? And it says, well, I'm going to take this information and put it into Airtable appropriately. The first thing I'm going to do is lowercase my email address received. I want to break it down to the bare lowercase to make sure that I don't have any duplicate data, right? So we'll do that in Zapier together. Then I want to take that lowercase value so that I know that I'm working with like a normalized email address. And I want to scan in my contacts table and see if I can find a contact with that email address. And if I find one, then I'm going to create a form, a record, and link it to the contact that I found in Airtable. But if I don't find one, then I'm going to create a contact in Airtable with that email address, and then create the form submission and link it to the contact I just created.
So cool.
All right.
I'm very
Awesome.
excited.
I guess
for
that will
this.
be for
Well,
episode 2.
Cliffhanger episode
be-
2.
That'll be episode 2, folks.
Um,
It's not as
well,
hard
I've
as you
gotta-
might think.
I've got to jump, but Gareth, already just the value of putting all of these in one kind of base and like treating all these record submissions, because they capture a lot of similar information all into one place, already is a huge value, because I never thought about doing that. I thought I would have to like kind of match all these together somewhere and say, oh, they filled out this form and this form and this form on these tables. So this already massively simplifies things and makes me think that I can build my CRM in the same base that the forms exist, which I didn't think we could do before. So already
Yes.
huge.
I didn't want to interrupt you there, Phil, but I do agree with you. I think your CRM should be all in one thing. Form submissions, CRM, pipeline, all of it.
I love it. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump, but please stay with questions. And Gareth, if you want to maybe kick it off from here around just going over even some of the stuff we covered, best practices around like how to think about a database when you're building a CRM, right? Because just like me, a lot of the folks in the no-code world are new to these concepts of like relational databases and what that even means in Airtable, right? So I think that'll be awesome.
1000%. Have a great talk there, Phil, and we'll
Yeah,
catch up again.
have
Will
fun.
do. I'll see you guys
Bye,
next week.
Phil.
I'm very excited.
Bye, Phil. All right. So I
Awesome.
guess thank you so much, for everything that you showed us so far. As you can tell, Phil is very excited, and so are we all in the company to see, this new concept of events unravel for us. So thank you so much for giving us some of your time. And speaking of time, we can now open the floor to Q&A. I know that we have a lot of people in the audience, and I would like to know from our public, do you have experience? Let us know in the chat if you have experience building CRMs, if you have any questions you might like to ask. And as we get the first questions in, Gareth, maybe you can talk a little bit about best practice on how to set up a database, or anything that you showed us so far.
Absolutely. So I'll just kind of revisit two of the key concepts I think that we talked about here today while we're waiting for some questions to come in. And they really surround best practices around understanding data sets. And then I want to talk briefly about that primary field as well. So, and this is, I would say maybe not specific to Airtable, but really just kind of true for relational databases in general. But obviously it applies here as well. So number one is understanding that when we create a table in a database, I come from a background in Excel. Before I got into databases, I was in finance as a financial analyst. I lived and breathed Excel for years. And when you are working in Excel, it's very common practice to just create a new sheet, right? Which is a little tab at the bottom of your spreadsheet. Happens all the time, and you don't even think about it. When you're working in Airtable or a relational database, I would challenge you to be very thoughtful about when you create a new table. As you saw today, and this is not a slam on Phil in any way, but Phil's original thought was, I've got 3 different forms, I need 3 different tables. But what they are, we actually want to minimize the number of tables or tabs when at all possible. And so realistically, what we have is 3 different forms. And so those forms may have different questions, and there are nuanced differences within the forms, but they all serve the same purpose, and they're all there to collect data, right? So why don't we put them in one table, as you saw today? So that's number one, is to be very conscious and intentional about creating a new table in Airtable or any database tool. And if at all possible, you can consolidate, as we saw today. I actually have a crash course that we built on helping people get up to speed with Airtable. And in it, one of the old lessons that we've improved over the years, but one of the original lessons was I was working with a client who had 3 different dance studios. And he had people going to each of his different dance studios for free lesson, and then he got them in his system. He was collecting contact information in 3 different tables, depending on what dance studio you went to. And it's like, just as we did with Phil here today, it was like, look, man, this is all contact information. That's what you're collecting. Put it in one table, and then just have a drop down that tells you what location they visited. The end, you're done. And he was just like, oh my gosh, it's all in one place, right? And so we're only able to get insights from our data if we have it all talking that way, and if we're able to consolidate it properly. So that's number one.
Mm-hmm. I think filtering is a very powerful feature that not many people are necessarily thinking about straight away. Because I can, just like you, I manage the community here, and then I use one table, and then I filter for whatever I need. But it's not necessarily the first. That came with experience of having a table for each single form and person and whatever, and then we end up with having thousands of things. And so it came with the experience. And I love the fact that we're here ready to share this with anyone that might be starting out, because we're gonna be saving them a whole lot of time. And so it's great. What's your second tip?
The second big tip is just to reiterate what we talked about on that primary field. And actually, I'm going to stand up a quick Airtable demo here to showcase why I follow these 2 rules. But when we're working in Airtable, we have the linked relationship between tables that we went through today, right? So here, let me share my screen.
Mm-hmm. As soon as I see it popping up, I'll bring it into this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Brilliant. Thank you. All right. So in our example today with Phil, we had the 2 different tables, one for form collection and then another table for contact information, right? When we built the linked relationship that we saw that Phil built, where we had our contacts linking to our forms, a contact can have multiple form submissions, but a form can have, only one contact submission, right? So we toggle this off. So when this comes into existence, we want to have, the information that shows up on the form record needs to make sense to us. It matters what we name our record, and here's why. As we demoed with Phil, here's our contact here, and I'm going to erase these fields that start by default. So far, we have our primary field, which we're going to want to clean up here, and we have our form, our link to forms. And then in our example today, we had the first name, we had a last name, and we had a company.
What shortcut is that?
How I replicated that field like that?
Yeah.
Hold down Alt, left click, and release. Drag and release.
Oh.
It copies whatever field you were working with right there. Thank you for asking. Sometimes I do it without thinking.
I love noticing those little details.
I mean, every little piece makes you that much faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's my information in our, contact here. Our contact record has my first name, my last name, our company, and our email. If we did something like use the email in our primary field, which was kind of our default setting, if Gareth fills out this form and he said, fills out this information, and whatever, maybe we assign a status to this, whatever information comes in the form submission, when we link to this contact, what we see right here on the linked record is whatever we named the record. So this is why the primary field matters and why I set up those 2 rules. So my 2 rules, again, just to reiterate, are make it something that helps you understand what record that is, like that identifies the record. I don't think about people from their email address. I have your email address, Claudia. If I saw it, I would never think, oh, that's Claudia from NoCodeOps, right? Like it wouldn't help me identify. So that's why I think make it something that helps you understand what this is. And then secondly, make it as unique as possible. And so for that reason, it's super simple to collect all your information on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th fields, as we've done here, name, company, email, and then use a concatenate as we demoed. And you can do this with a simple formula that says, I'm taking that information as we demoed earlier, and I'm going to put it in here. Maybe it's just first and last name, or maybe it includes the company name, etc. So this output now is automatic. Automatic's not the right word. This output is dependent upon the values that live here, the end, right? And now when I have a link to that contact, I'm like, oh, I know that person. I know who that is, right?
Yeah.
So
my favorite field is LinkedIn. So people in my community know that, whenever somebody joins us at NoCodeOps, I'm straight onto their LinkedIn because I want to make that human connection, make sure, I make a point of connecting with you all. And so that would be my favorite field to have, like name, last name, LinkedIn. That's how I know who you are.
100%, right? Include that LinkedIn URL and whatever other information you need on the contact record, right? Because it belongs to the contact.
Yeah, we do have a question coming from the chat from Rachel. Should I put it in for you? Okay, so what are the benefits to building a CRM versus building a pre-made solution like HubSpot, Salesforce, etc.?
That's a great question, Rachel. Thank you. The glory of building your own CRM is that you can create it to your needs, and every business, frankly, is unique in some way. So your workflows are not, when you buy a pre-built CRM solution from a HubSpot, or, there are so many different options out there, you're confined to the restrictions of that software. Whereas with a tool like Airtable that allows you to create your own CRM, you can build it to your own specifications. So that is both good and bad. The good news is you can do practically whatever you want to with it. The bad news is you have to make it do it. So you need to spend some time up front to build the solution. But assuming that you're here in our webinar today, you're probably already aligned with using these tools, right? So
yeah, she's well vetted. I know Rachel, she's awesome.
Yeah, just judging from the chat that I've seen coming from Rachel, I kind of figure she knows what she's doing. So
she does. Yeah, I'm gonna let you keep explaining, and then I have more questions from our forum as well.
Yeah, perfect. If I were to add any other things here to what we were talking about with Phil earlier, and again, I know we haven't gotten to the point where we've built out the automation yet, but I'm sure we can start imagining that. One of the key things that I'm going to recommend that he does is, and we've already nailed this part, but is identify what form this was filled out for. So generally what we'll do is build an automation that says when a form is filled out, we're going to bring that information into Airtable like we identified. We're going to see if we can find that contact. If we can't find them, we'll create them. And then we will link to the contact that we find or create, and we will create that form submission. And so inside of this, we'll also have the form options. So we'll have form 1, form 2. Whoops, I'm not trying to set a default option. Excuse me. Here we go. Form 1, form 2, etc. So that when people fill out these forms, we know which form they filled out, and then we're going to have unique questions that are filled out as well. So imagine that Gareth filled out both forms, form 1 and form 2. Let me delete this record here. We have 2 form submissions here. And note that I'm being lazy. I haven't filled out my form primary field. So again, let's follow those rules. how do we know? Well, let's make it unique, and let's also make it so that it tells us what this record is. Well, a couple of things. Gareth might fill out form multiple times on our website. He could have filled out form 1 numerous times. So just to make it as unique as possible, we can also use the created date that tells us when he filled out that form in the primary field. So again, I'll run a concatenate here. I'll include the contact person because it matters to me who filled the form out. That's part of what identifies this record. I'll include, let's see, a little bar here. I'll include the form that they filled out. And I will lastly include the date and time. Now, real quick, pause here. If you're new to formulas in Airtable, we have access to the created time of a record. But if I use it like this, it's going to be hideous. I'll show you. Let's go ahead and confirm the change.
Do you have a favorite resource where people can start learning about formulas, or should they be reading the documentation? What would you
Airtable's
recommend?
put together really sufficient documentation. For me personally, as I mentioned earlier, I came from an Excel background. These formulas are very similar. The key difference in formulas in Airtable is that they don't reference specific cells. So when you build when you build formulas in spreadsheets, you have the ability to click a specific cell and say, I want you to reference the information here. Whereas in Airtable and any database tool, when you build a formula, you're referencing an entire field at a time. So you notice that in my formulas, I'm referencing the contact field, I'm referencing the form field, etc.
Yeah.
So, but otherwise, great question, Claudia. I think the best resource is Airtable. And of course, we've built some courses around this as well if folks are interested in going a little deeper. To our example here, though, that created time is showing up kind of messy. It's not necessarily the best way to read it. So we're going to wrap a date time formula around this one. So we're going to format the created date and time into lowercase l format, which is a simple month, day, year. Again, all of this is available on the Airtable resources. So now that cleans up the date a lot. It's showing us May 4th. Of course, if you are on the other side of the pond, you might want to flip those dates around so that it's 4/5, but here in the US, 5/4.
That always confuses me so much.
Oh my gosh, me too. Every time I'm working with a UK-based client, especially if it's a date like this that's in the earlier part of the month.
I know.
I'm confused.
All the joys of different dates and time zones and all of that.
I know. So generally, I would recommend then setting up some views that help us get to the data we want to see faster. So in this case, we might want to see our forms individually. So we might want to see all of the form submissions for form 1, and then quickly be able to flip into all the form submissions for form 2, etc. We do this with creating views in Airtable. So the view is here on the left-hand side. Note that I can shrink this down as well. So if I want to get rid of that, menu, I can. But if I want to create new views and or rename this view, I can call this all records because I've applied no special filtering or anything to this. But I can then create a new view, duplicate this view, and let's make this one form 1 submissions. And up here on my toolbar, any changes that I make to this are going to reflect or are going to be reflected only in this view. So this is kind of the power of, I'm not deleting any data from Airtable. I am filtering what I see, ordering it, sorting it, grouping it, adding color. Any changes I make right here on my toolbar, any fields that I hide, any groupings that I apply will only apply to this particular view, thereby making it easier for me to see the information I need when I flip to this view, right? So simply put, the easy low-hanging fruit is to say, I only want to see stuff that includes form 1. Form 2 is now removed from this view. Even though if I go back to all records, I still have all 3 of those records. So I think the key takeaway here is the way that we use spreadsheets. We go into spreadsheets and we look at them and we start adding tabs, as I was mentioning. We don't need to do that here. We can simply say all of that data lives here, and then I'm going to segment that data as needed by applying filters and whatnot to my views. So I could easily replicate this view, make form 2 submissions, and make a slight change to the filters, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the key best practices. If you're brand new to databases, if you're brand new to Airtable, I think that's going to help you get going.
Fantastic. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for going through those. I think, even if you're not new, it's always good to learn about them as well and kind of like fix your bad habit, if it makes sense. And so it's always very useful to have. We have a couple minutes left. So if that's okay with you, I can just ask you a couple questions that we have from our forum, from the people in the audience. And all right, let me just pull them in. So we have a question from Trip Stanford. So hi, Trip. What would you like to improve with Airtable? Where does it lack? So I guess, where do you see room for improvement in the tool? Oh, I can't hear you anymore. Why is that?
I muted myself. Sorry, Claudia.
Okay.
I didn't want to be rude to the audience. Sorry. Thanks for reminding me.
No worries.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. One area that we'd asked for improvements on for a long time was in interfaces. So being able to share limited data to our Airtable users, like to people on our team. Maybe we have some private data. We don't want everything to be visible, but we want to give them access to certain things. For the longest time, that was not possible. But within the last year, Airtable's made very, very nice improvements to their interface, which now gives us that capability. So that was a big key one, that improvements are still being made constantly on interfaces. We keep getting more and more power from them. But in short, they've come a long, long way. And so for internal tooling, they've started to solve that. The only place that they're leaving opportunity is with external tooling. If the caveat here is, if I want to share access to my Airtable database through an interface so that people only see certain things, and by the way, this is like third or fourth version of our training, right? So we're getting ahead of ourselves. But if I'm sharing
a little sneak peek, because I can see other questions about interfaces as well in the form. So little sprinkle of sneak peek for episode 3 or 4 of our series.
Interfaces are pure magic. I mean, they allow us to give people access to specific data. We can limit it so that they only see stuff that they've been given permission to see. They can only edit stuff that they've been given permission to edit. It is great for internal tooling. The negative from this is that they must be Airtable users. So there are many use cases where you don't want to pay for a user, but you want to give them very limited access to data, but it's certainly not worth $25 a month, right? Like, this is where there are third-party tools like Softer.io and many other no-code platforms that you can build front ends so people can actually interact with your data without having to add users to Airtable. That's one area that I'd like to see Airtable improve on in the future, so that I can, let's say, for example, you wanted to share access to a whole list of data inside of Airtable and give people the ability to edit just one or two fields. It's hard to justify spending $25 a month for everybody who wants to get that access, right?
Yeah.
So that's the cost of the Airtable Pro plan. So that's one area that I'd love to see Airtable really improve on. The other area that I'd love to see more improvements in from Airtable is in the realm of AI. Smart Suite, I know you guys just did a webinar on them last month. They're taking AI to the next level right now, really unlocking and leaning into the forefront of changing technology. And I'd like to see Airtable do that. I agree with Marcus.
Yeah. Airtable's pricing model is shooting themselves in the foot. Yeah. They need to. It's a tough world, There's a lot of competitors, and people always have to come up with new solutions or justify their pricing. I agree. There's an interesting question here from Dino. how to set up a process to send emails from a CRM built in Airtable. How do you set up a process to send emails from a CRM in Airtable?
Great question, Dino. So this is what I will say. I'll choose my words carefully. There are two different ways that you can send email from Airtable. Well, no, gosh, there's more than that. Let me take a step back and answer your question completely, and then I'll tell you what our best practices. There is an integration with SendGrid inside of Airtable extensions. Airtable extensions allow you to do more with the data that you have living inside of Airtable. You can set up an extension so that you can send a mass email to people in your CRM through an integration with SendGrid. And it requires that you set up the API and all of that through SendGrid, but you can send a mass email, and that's one way.
That's episode 10.
Yeah, exactly. You can also send automated emails after certain triggers happen. You can say, when something happens in Airtable, like a status is updated for a client, I then want to send them an email that says, whatever. So that's an automation. And so you have both of those options. Now, the third option is to build an automation that talks with a third-party email service provider. And I strongly recommend this if you are doing mass emailing. It's similar to the SendGrid approach, except that you're sending them to, let's say, a MailChimp, a Constant Contact, ConvertKit, ActiveCampaign. All of these are email tools that allow you to send mass emails. The reason that I strongly recommend that is because, especially in the world of GDPR, there are specific rules and regulations around how we can send email and communicate with our clients or prospective clients, customers, fill in the blank. And so we want to be compliant in that regard. And so mass email tools like MailChimp, et cetera, allow us to remain in compliance. So that's my preference. Now, that being said, we send hundreds of emails a month through our CRM as part of our workflow process. Something like a client approves work and we automatically create an invoice for them and send it via email. That's built in Make.com or Zapier, integrating with Stripe, integrating with Gmail. So it's actually coming from our email address and from our Stripe account and all these other tools, but it's part of an automated process and it's not a mass email. It was sent to a client specifically who requested it because they took action within the workflow. So I want to draw a clear delineation between I'm sending an email to 10,000 people at once versus I'm sending a one-off email for this client who's ready to take the next step. And I might send that email 10 times in a day, but it's because of an action the client took.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that is clear.
100%. Let me just pull in this other question from Adam. So I've always struggled with the front-end side of Airtable and making it viable option for users at our company who are less technically inclined. How do you typically manage a rollout of Airtable to a company from a user training standpoint if there is no front-end on it? Good question.
That's a great question. So this is where Airtable can have a bit of a double-edged sword in the sense that it's incredibly powerful, but it's also scary to put that power in the hands of the users if they don't know what they're doing. So as best practice, what we do with our clients is generally there's one or two champions at the organization who are really advocating for the tool, and they've gone above and beyond and learned how the tool works and all of this. And ultimately, they're going to be the support for their staff when we've delivered a product, right? So, and I don't mean to necessarily speak to this question from the consulting perspective, but it is my relevant experience. So, client will work with us, we solve the problem, we build the tool, and then we do a handoff and a bit of a training. So generally those, what we call champions, have, untethered access to do whatever they want in Airtable because they've put in the time and effort to learn the tool. We generally don't recommend that everybody on the staff has that level of access. It's just too much. So you can limit the way that they access data through the interfaces in Airtable. And instead of sharing the database itself, think of the database. I mean, when you share the database, you're sharing the back end. There's no way in Airtable to say, I don't want you to see this sensitive information. If you have access to the database, you have access to everything. And if you have creator access to the database, you can delete a field, a table, you can break a formula. Like, those are people that you want to lock down, right? You really want to be thoughtful. So
yeah, admin access, with great power comes great responsibility. 100%.
100%. So I would suggest, even if you don't, well, I would suggest that as you roll it out to a team, that you do put a lightweight interface in place and only share access to the interface. Only then are you going to be able to control and filter the data that people see. If you're sharing access to the database, it's anyone's game.
Another question from Adi. So when would you not use the tool? What are the limitations?
Good question, Abby. Biggest limitation is record count. So you can explore the current record counts on airtable.com/pricing, I believe. Record count is limited to the base, which is Airtable's term for the database. So depending on what plan you're on, and the majority of our clients are either on a pro plan or an enterprise plan. Pro plan is around $25 a month per user. And I believe the pro plan's current limitations are 50,000 records per database. So a lot of times we'll be working with clients that have many more records than that. In fact, we have an enterprise client right now who is, we're determining viability of the project because they just deal with hundreds of thousands of records. And even on the enterprise tier, where you get more record limitations, it still might not be viable. So it becomes a question of, do you actually need to bring that information into Airtable, and does it need to be its own record? And if the answer is yes, can you archive that data at a certain point, right? Like, break it off, archive it so that you have a stored history of it, but it's not like actively in use. And if the answer there is no, then it's not viable, right? The record limit is what it is. And if you can't find a way to circumvent the number of records, then you have to look elsewhere.
Awesome. Thank you. I guess we can squeeze in one last question, and then I'll save up all the remaining ones for next week, and I'm sure we'll get some more. So before we wrap up, one last question from Benjamin. What automations do you find the most critical to build out when building?
What automations are most critical? Depends on the functionality of what you're trying to do. And I don't mean to kick the can down the road with this answer, but it really comes down to, analyzing what your workflow is. So if you recall at the beginning, it's like, before we get going here, let's talk about what we're building. So having an understanding of what we're trying to solve, and then finding the lowest hanging fruit and building automations to help facilitate that part of the workflow. Where we see the most time being saved is in those repetitive emails that go back and forth, invoicing, document creation. This is generally done with third-party tools. If you need to create like agreements and send stuff out for for signature and things of that nature, you can do all that in Airtable or through Airtable automation. Those are the big ones. Sending bills and things like that to QuickBooks, and these are largely like small medium business needs. When we work with enterprise clients, it's more like inter-office communication, sending messages via Slack, updating statuses and various things. So, but it really comes down to the workflow that you're solving for. I would say that an automator's job is never done. You can always think of, oh, hey, I can automate that, right? So you start with where you can see the biggest gains and for the least amount of time, and then as the thing progresses, you'll probably find yourself adding little ancillary automations into perpetuity. It's just, we never get away from it.
Yeah, always think of the why, I guess, before you start anything, before you start building whatever it might be. Why are you doing that?
100%.
Why, who you're doing it for, and then you can think about how you're going to do that. Awesome. Gareth, if we think of next week, what can we expect?
Next week, I'm really hoping to jump in here with Phil again and start building that automation. I think we need to start create at least our first form automation that says, hey, a form was submitted. Let's bring that data into our database, and then we're going to give Phil some homework so that he can replicate that for all of his forms. I think we can get through that pretty easily. Do at least one of those.
That'll be fun. And I'm sure, one thing I can say for sure is that we can expect a lot more learning from you, a lot more knowledge. And so, thank you so much once again for being here with us today. I'm looking forward to next week, especially the part where you give Phil some homework. I'm really curious to see how that will will go down. And for everyone else here, thank you so much for coming today. If you want to keep following our series for the whole month of May, we will be building in public. So make sure you do sign up. It's all free. And if you want, this is the link to our community as well, where you can find me there, and you can find all of our experts from the no-code space as well. All right. Well, thank you so much, Gareth, once again. Have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Claudia. See you then.
Bye, everyone.